You are listening to Let's Talk Trio on podcasts. Keep up with the latest episodes by downloading the Podbean app or stream episodes via our social media accounts. Search for Let's Talk Trio on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. This episode is sponsored by Student Access. Student Access, the leader in Trio software. Student Access is an online database solution that allows Trio programs to track their students' information, connect with students by text messages, streamline the APR, and work from anywhere, all online, with automatic updates for changes from the Department of Education. Their technical support team includes former Trio staff and has over 50 years of combined experience working with Trio. Make it easier to focus on your priority, the students. For more information and to request a free demo, visit their website at www.studentaccess.com or call them toll-free at 1-800-801-1232. That website again is www.studentaccess.com or 1-800-801-1232. Be sure to share your favorite episodes on your social media by tapping that share button. This is a great way to support the podcast. Now here's your host, Juan Rivas.
Thank you, Amelia, for that wonderful introduction. Hello, listener, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Trio. This is Season 6, Episode 8. I am your host, Juan Rivas. In today's episode, we have Jasper Wojtach, who is the Retention and Tutor Coordinator for Utica University's Trio Student Support Services program, and they are also a proud Trio alum. Jasper is on the podcast to talk about their educational journey, their experience in education, and what it was like being served by Trio and now working for Trio. So coming up in just a bit, Jasper Wojtach. A huge thanks to our sponsors, Angelica Villalpando, Rosario O'Reilly, Dr. Ryan Barone, Dr. Jamie Motley, Dr. Jeff Napudi, Angelica Valdez, Felicia Rivera, Jaded Electronics, TrioJoblist.com, NOSOTROS Education Center, Cambridge Educational Services, and Student Access. Thank you all so much for your continued support of this podcast. You too can be a sponsor of the podcast. Head on over to Patreon and search for Let's Talk Trio. Choose one of 4 patron levels. You can support this podcast for as little as $1 a month. $1 a month goes a long way in supporting this podcast. If you own a business and would like to advertise on our podcast, send us a message for details. Become a supporter with a one-time donation to the podcast PayPal account. Our handle is @Let'sTalkTrio. Any amount is truly appreciated. If you would like to nominate a participant, staff, advocate, or alumni to be in the podcast, send us an email at letstalktrio@gmail.com. That email again is letstalktrio@gmail.com. Again, a great episode featuring Jasper Wojtach, a staff member of Utica University's Trio Student Support Services program. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hi, Trio Nation. My guest on the Let's Talk Trio podcast is a Retention and Tutor Coordinator for Utica University's Trio Student Support Services program. They obtained their bachelor's degree in 2019 from Binghamton University studying human development and earned their master's in 2021 from Syracuse University studying higher education administration. They are a Trio alum and are proud to share that Trio truly makes a difference. My guest enjoys writing and game design. Welcome to the podcast, Jasper Wojtach. Jasper, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
Thank you so much for being here and for your willingness to share your Trio journey. It's just an honor to have you.
Absolutely. I love Trio. Trio is such a huge part of my life. I always take any opportunity I can to talk these programs up.
Wonderful. So I really can't wait to hear your Trio journey and your experience. To really start us off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I was born and raised Long Island, youngest of 3. Really, it was just a matter of I come from all 3 of the major backgrounds for Trio SSS. So low income family. Neither of my parents had completed a college education. My mom didn't complete high school, and I didn't learn to call myself disabled until I was well into being an undergrad, but
Mm-hmm.
boy, did that sure define a lot of my experience anyway, regardless of what I wanted to call myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a lot of what took me into being a part of these programs.
Wow. All right. So I got to go back a little bit at the very beginning of the introduction. You shared or uh, prescript was written that you enjoy writing and game development. Can you tell us a little bit? How did you get into those hobbies and what drew you in?
Yeah, so game development is one that really just started with loving games a whole lot.
Hmm.
Uh, so I grew up, really the big first one was growing up with a hand-me-down Game Boy Advance and
Hmm.
copies of every Pokemon game to date at that point
Yeah.
from my older siblings, and a whole bunch of Yu-Gi-Oh cards that they had outgrown. And it just became a ever expanding deal. So when I was a kid, I
Wow.
would take regular office index cards and I would draw my own trading cards onto
That's
them,
so
and I
cool.
would force my family members to play against me. Um, and then over time, it just developed into working on like board game prototyping, and
Mm.
now through high school and undergrad, I got really into like tabletop role play stuff. So it
Hmm.
started with not wanting to pay for the Dungeons Dragons books because they're so expensive.
It
So I
can be,
just
yes.
I watched a bunch of actual play stuff on YouTube and said, I think I
Hmm.
have the gist of how these rules work. And I started just cobbling together my own systems because I did not want to spend money on them. And that just took me into this whole world of like indie game development. And with that just came a whole lot of writing of, okay, well, I have all these ideas and all this stuff that I want to tell.
Hmm.
I need to get good at writing, I guess.
Yeah.
And they just sort of have been intertwined ever since.
That is amazing. I love how one aspect of an interest can grow into like now I got to get really good at this skill. I gotta get really good at this other thing. So it seems like and this is just based on some of the video games that I've played, like Legend of Zelda and various other video games. Like you really want to get into the lore and how some creators have built that lore inside their video game or their on their game overall.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like a huge thing with like games that are mostly text, like role-playing games where a lot of it is what the players build into it,
Hmm.
is how do you give them enough pieces without telling them this is the world you have to play in, while
Hmm.
also making it structured enough that it's like, okay, there are rules and parameters of what can happen,
Mm.
but as long as you're broadly within those, have at it, go nuts.
That is so awesome. So we are recording this episode as we're nearing the end of 2023. What have you personally or professionally accomplished or wanted to accomplish this year?
So starting this year, I had two big goals that I was working on. The first is starting last year, I started giving myself a book goal every year.
A book
So
goal.
just a number of books that I wanted to read
Hmm.
before the year was over. Last year it was 17, and I did not make that goal because I started way too late. Uh, but this year I said, all right, I know what I did wrong. I want to try and do 23 books for 2023. And right now I am in the middle of my 26th, I think. So
Wow.
I learned something. I accomplished
Yeah,
that.
that is
Uh,
amazing. So
yeah.
that's a good segue to the next question. What is something you learned about yourself this year?
Hmm. So something that I learned about myself is definitely from my other big goal, which was I really wanted to spend a lot of time doing research into PhD programs and
Hmm.
figuring out what was the right fit for me and where I might want to go. And what I learned about myself is that I need to slow down sometimes because I get really obsessed with goals,
Hmm.
and then I end up burning myself out because I spend so much time on them so fast that then by the time I'm at a decision, I'm like, I don't want to do that anymore. So
I hear that.
I've decided to, instead of saying I'm going to take a year and do all of the PhD prep that I absolutely have to, instead it's okay, I learned a lot of good stuff. Now
Hmm.
let's take another 2, 3 years and actually sift through it and make an informed good choice and not obsess too much at the start.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I like how you say permission to give yourself to slow down. I think often we find excuses to like push through or power through some of our goals because we're like we're not giving ourselves that permission, right? That kind of self-care aspect of it is like, well, we got to do it or do it or else. So in that aspect of permission, giving yourself permission, what made you realize like that had to be a thing to give yourself permission?
I think and I think this does come from a lot of like the trio background stuff of like, I think I always had a chip on my shoulder. I always felt that I had something to prove of I can do this. I do deserve to be here. I do belong. And if you don't believe it, then I'm going to be better than you so I can prove that I belong here.
Right.
And I think so much of that became so much of my personality that at a certain point something had to give. And now
Mm.
through my mid 20s, what I'm learning is, okay, you don't have to do that constantly, and you can stop and just take your time. You don't have to prove anything anymore. And game design taught me that if it's not fun, what's the point?
Yeah.
So
Oh my
now I
gosh.
can slow down and enjoy things rather than just trying to be big and bright and loud about it.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful frame that you're operating from. So what are your hopes and goals for next year for 2024?
Yeah. So, um, goal number one is I would like to try and get published in an actual like scholarly journal.
Mm.
Um, so that is I think that that is sort of a stepping stone towards PhD stuff that is a manageable thing to do within a year. I've
Hmm.
started doing my research and my work on that, and that's a huge goal for me. And then the other one is just to uh, keep moving slow and have projects that are just for me and make weird art in my house. And no one has to see it, but as long as it's just keep doing weird little things that make me happy.
Right on. That's amazing. So you say weird art. What does that mean?
So in addition to like the game design, I work in a couple of different mediums.
Hmm.
My partner and I both work in paper craft and paper engineering. So
Hmm.
I do a lot of collage stuff, and I also do a little bit of music production. But the thing
Mm.
that I've really leaned into is that a lot of stuff is going to look and sound kind of weird and maybe not everyone's cup of tea, but oftentimes just the act of making something and like taking the time to bring something into being is worth it in itself. And not to be cliche about it, but like as long as I love what I'm making, that's really what it all comes down to at the end of the day.
Absolutely. 100% agreed. Sum up 2023 for you in one word.
I think probably the best word for that would be exploratory
Hmm.
because like I said, I was doing all of my PhD search stuff. I've been reading so much this year, and really just figuring out what feels right and good as
Hmm.
far as where I want to be professionally, what I want to keep doing with my time, what fits me best. I'm also kind of like in the longest relationship I've ever been in, so this whole year has been the two of us sort of learning what that's like together. So it's just been a lot of like discovering new things and figuring out what's working.
Yeah, amazing. Jasper, can you take us back to your childhood? What was your upbringing like?
Yeah. So growing up on Long Island was is definitely interesting. I like to say that Long Island is an absolutely beautiful place filled with some of the worst people you'll ever meet. And maybe that's not being kind to my place of origin, but it sure is what I lived while I was there.
Okay.
Uh, but so growing up, we moved a couple of times, and it was definitely just a matter of always trying to figure out, hmm, no, scratch that, reverse it. I think a lot of it was I always had like a small group of people that I felt comfortable with,
Mm-hmm.
and then everywhere else I felt uncomfortable.
Mm.
Um, and part of that came from like being low income in an area where I didn't know what other people were at income wise. Part of it was growing up as a kid who didn't realize that they were trans yet. Um,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
and so it was a lot of just, okay, I need to find who do I fit with and where do I fit. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what led to some of what I talked about before with that whole like chip on my shoulder, I need to prove that I belong. When really I
Yeah.
don't think that I had to in a lot of cases, but it
Mm-hmm.
sure was the mindset that I had inherited.
Absolutely. Can you talk a little bit more about the your family, right? How would they describe you, and what's something that they observed about you, or things that they saw potential in you?
Oh. I think my family has remarked on the fact that I am, oh, this feels so weird to say, but I mean, like, one of the first things my family would describe me as is they would say I'm a smart kid. Um, I think that from the time that I was like really young, my mom pushed me very aggressively towards thinking about college. It was never like an
Oh
option in the
wow.
house. It was, this is what
Yeah.
you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that was huge for me, just having like that sort of beyond even encouragement, just like a forceful push from the very beginning of this is what you have to do.
Mm-hmm. Did that mean that you were very educationally inclined? Like you were really just kind of drawn to education from the get-go?
Absolutely. I grew up, I loved school. I loved school a lot. It was always very good to me when I was like a little kid. It
Mm-hmm.
was one of my favorite things to do. And I just loved to learn. I was very curious. For the longest time when I was a kid, if you had asked me what I wanted to be, I would have said a field ecologist.
A field
And
ecologist, really?
most adults would immediately follow up with either, why do you know what that is? Or
Yeah.
what is that? Because I loved science. I loved learning.
Yeah.
I loved reading about animals and learning about like the world and ecosystems, and it all fit together in just like such a neat little way in my head. And I was obsessed. I loved to learn.
Yeah. That is so unique to right know at such a young age what you wanted to do and going in that direction. Because most kids around that age are thinking about, I want to be a police officer. I think I want to be a doctor, right? Like, but in a very general sense of a direction, but not very specific.
Yeah. I remember one of my aunts asked me once when I was talking about all this stuff. I had to have been like 7, and she
Hmm.
was like, "So you love animals so much? Do you think you want to be a veterinarian?" And I was like, "Oh no, I can't be a veterinarian." And she was like, "Why?"
Yeah.
And I turned to her with like all the seriousness a 7-year-old can muster, and I was like, "I can't see an animal hurt."
Oh.
And I think that was like such a
Oh.
it's like a memory that I hold
Right.
on to because I think it really encapsulates a lot of like what was going on in my little head of like
Hmm.
I need to know everything about them. I need to interact with them, but like
Hmm.
I know what that path involves and I can't deal with like the pain and the hurt of it all. I need to see
Wow.
the good and the fun and the interesting.
Wow. Wow. What do you remember most about your early education?
Hmm. I think for early education, elementary type stuff, it was just the sort of feeling of like learning and fun. I feel like I'm going to talk about fun a lot because
Yeah,
that's
go
a
for it.
whole
Yes.
it's a whole part of my
Do it.
whole gig. But I think it was the fact that like learning and fun were always together.
Hmm.
And I was very encouraged to approach things in the way that I wanted to.
Hmm.
So it was like when we covered units that were around things that I was passionate about, I would come up to the teachers and I'd be like, I have a book at home that's about this. Can I bring it in? And they'd be
Oh.
like, yeah, absolutely. Or like the little song and dance of it all, of literal song and dance for like, okay, this is the song to remember like the water cycle.
Hmm.
And it's like that slowly phased out over time the older that I got. And like early education, I think it was a huge part of what hooked me and got me into being like a voracious reader was, oh, this isn't just learning, it's learning
Mhm.
and it's fun. And I love
Yeah.
both those things now.
Wow. That's amazing. So earlier you said it was pretty much not a question of if, but more when you go to college, right? So how often was that emphasized, or was that drilled kind of already early on?
I would say that it wasn't even something that was talked about often, but
Mm.
when it was talked about, it was with just such an air of certainty.
Hmm.
And then my older sister, she's 7 years older than I am.
Hmm.
So by the time that I was going into middle school, she was leaving for college.
Hmm.
And so it was like a family affair of like me and my mom and her all going up to where she was going to school. She was going to school like 10 hours away from where we grew up.
Wow.
So to like bring her up and drop her off, it was this whole dramatic, like tearful affair.
Hmm.
And it was always during those moments that it would be like, oh, well, this is what it's going to be like when you go to college also.
Mm.
Not if, but when you go to college, this is what it'll be like.
I see. So, how did you and your family prepare as you were wrapping up your early education and elementary and middle school? How did you all prepare for your transition into high school?
For me, I think I think the transition into high school itself wasn't huge. So we had moved right before I entered middle school.
Mm.
And so I feel like the big transition for most people is middle into high school. But at that point, I was like,
Really?
well, I already don't know anyone. So I'm kind of just going from one building where I don't know anyone to another building where I don't know anyone.
Mm.
Um, but I would say that it was after like finishing that freshman year of high school that things really started to click. And
Hmm.
I found the places where I felt comfortable. I started taking AP classes, and like that ended up being a huge support network for me. Um, but yeah, directly into high school, I'm not sure there was anything like huge in that step.
Okay. Did you get involved in a variety of extracurricular activities or clubs? Because I hear you said AP classes took a lot of your time. What about the clubs, organizations, or extracurricular activities?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, the two big ones were I was part of the environmental club where we would go around school and do all the school's recycling essentially.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
we made the recycling bins for all the classrooms, and then every Thursday we would go around with like the wheeling trash cans and we would collect them all and like collectively heave ho them into one of the dumpsters. Um,
Uh-huh.
and the other one was fencing. I fenced from uh the beginning of high school for the entirety of high school. That was
Hmm.
my I would say that was the best part of high school for me was fencing and having my little community there. It was a co-ed sport, so it
Hmm.
was just this huge conglomeration of us all in a room together.
Hmm.
And it felt like family. It was great.
That's awesome. Talk to us a little bit more about those extracurricular activities. Um, is it something that you were like really curious about and you really wanted to do fencing and recycling? I'm guessing that was just you were being very planet conscious. Yeah. How did that happen for you?
Environmental Club was definitely like the planet conscious friend to all living things mentality that cropped up when I was a kid.
Hmm.
Fencing was if you recall the hit Nickelodeon show iCarly,
I do.
um, there was a 2 episode subplot where one of the main characters got really into the sport of fencing, and I saw
Hmm.
that as an eighth grader, and I said, "That's cool. I want to do
Hmm.
that."
Hmm.
And my mom said, "Cool, you want to do something that isn't in the house? Let's invest in that." And the summer before I started high school, she would drive me like a half hour to a town a whiles away, which had the only
Hmm.
like real fencing center around us, and I started taking little lessons.
Hmm.
And then it was actually by complete happenstance that the first day of ninth grade, I had to just pick a random table to sit at lunch. And this group of like sophomores decided to just like sit around me, and
Hmm.
all of them were on the fencing team. And
Oh,
I was like,
wow.
wait. no, I want to do that. I've been doing that all summer. How do I do that?
Yeah,
And they ended up being like just huge mentors and friends to me for the rest of my time in high school. So it was a complete coincidence that just really worked out in my favor.
that's wonderful. I gotta ask, did you feel like you were pretty proficient in it?
No. I I can be objective and say that while I had so much fun and I enjoyed doing it, I
Hmm.
was like mid-tier at absolute best. I was good at like two or three little tricks,
Uh-huh.
but for the most part, it was like I was nothing special. And if anything, that kind of makes the memory sweeter.
Oh, that's amazing. So my follow-up was going to be like, did you do it competitively? Competitively, is it something that you kind of kept up with while in high school?
I kept up with through all of high school. I was on our varsity team by the time that I graduated. I was actually captain in my senior year. I was co-captain
Amazing.
for our epee team. And we did go out and we did like all island competitions and stuff like that. But just kind of objectively, we were not bringing home trophies. We were all there because we liked goofing around with
Hmm.
blades. And
My next question then to you is, at what point in your high school education and slash career did college enter your mind? If college was already something being emphasized in your family, you were talking about it, at one point did you say, you know what, this is just something I'm gonna have to pursue?
I think it started really nebulously in like ninth grade, like freshman year-ish, where a lot of the conversations with my friends and like teachers in like pre-AP track classes would be, oh, well, next year you should be taking APs if you're successful in this because it looks really good to colleges.
Hmm.
Or some of my friends saying, oh, well, I think it was like literally our freshman year, and one of my friends was telling me, oh, well, college is like it if you stay with one thing for a long time instead of being in a bunch of disparate things because it shows that you can commit to something. And I was like,
Hmm.
I'm 14. I don't know that I want to think about that yet, but I did
Yeah.
I did sure internalize it and I did act on
Mm-hmm.
that. But
Mm-hmm.
I would say it ended up being like a huge conversation by sophomore year. I was taking my first AP and
Mm-hmm.
it was just the question on everyone's mind, especially as I started taking more AP classes and I began running with the kids who made taking AP classes their personality click. Uh, a lot of conversations did go back to, well, what's the next step? What are we all doing after this? And
Mm-hmm.
usually that meant, what colleges are you looking at?
Absolutely. So is this a discussion that you had obviously with friends? What about family? Is this something that you like openly talked about, encouraged? I'm guessing so, if family again encouraged the idea of college education.
Yeah, my mom, so through my school, because we were a free lunch program receiving household, we also got to take the PSAT for free
Hmm.
uh, in my district. And so when my mom caught wind of that through whatever handout or mail they sent to her, um, she was like, okay, you are going to take the PSAT as soon as possible.
Hmm.
And I took it twice and then I took the SAT once, but it was always just like as soon as something came through the door of this is something that is good for college, this is a preparatory thing, my mom was on it and it was always a matter of, okay, well, when are you doing this?
Hmm.
Um, and I was not always I was good at school, but I wasn't studious. So when it came time to like get ready for the PSAT, she would be asking me, okay, when are you studying? How are you studying? What are you doing for it?
Hmm.
And I would always be like, I'm gonna be fine. I'll take the test and we'll see what happens. And I don't think she liked that answer, but it and then as I approached like my junior year of high school, it very much became a whole family affair of, well, where are you going? Where are you considering?
Wow.
All that good stuff.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
Are you seeking guidance to enhance your TRIO project's effectiveness and success? Look no further. Nosotros Education Center, NEC, is here to empower your TRIO project with expert consulting services. NEC's mission is to promote the effectiveness and impact of TRIO programs. Since 2003, NEC has specialized in providing professional development and in-service staff trainings, allowable cost services, for TRIO projects across the country. The team at NEC, with over 60 years of combined TRIO experience, offers customized workshops and seminars for project staff, compliance assessments, external evaluations, working on and submitting APRs, database customization and training, development of policies and procedures manuals, and project implementation or reorganization services. Additionally, NEC has secured over $774 million in federal funding with a 92% success rate through their live and on-demand proposal workshops, assistance with data collection and review, detailed technical reviews, and comprehensive proposal development services. Join the hundreds of colleges, agencies, and TRIO projects across the country who benefited from NEC's expertise. Nosotros Education Center, your partner in TRIO's project success. Visit their website at nosotros.edu.org. Again, that's nosotrosedu.org.
And now, back to the podcast. So, speaking of where are you going and what schools are you considering, did you know what schools made it to your radar in terms of choices?
So, a little bit yes and no. One of the things that I actually thought about was, so my older sister, she had completed college. She'd completed her undergrad by the time that I was like starting up my journey. Which I consider a huge benefit because while first gen, that's definitely not something that everyone has. And I recognize that like having her just to be a person I could talk to every now and then did make a huge difference. But I remember talking to her once and saying like, oh, what if I go to your alma mater and we make it into like a family thing and it's a family and it's a like whole thing that we do. And she looked at me and just said in like a complete matter of fact tone, don't apply there. You're smarter than that. And I was like, okay, I guess we won't make it a fun family thing.
Out of curiosity, what college was this?
I wasn't going to say because she made that comment, but
we could keep it.
It was SUNY Plattsburgh up by the Canadian border.
All right.
But mostly it just turned into a conversation of like talking to the guidance counselor in my school and being like, what are the best SUNYs? And just sort of starting there because I knew broadly, I knew in-state tuition is less than out-of-state, so let's try and stay in-state. And public is less expensive than private, I think. So let's go for public. And those were my first two main building blocks of, it was always a cost efficiency thing in my brain.
I think for a lot of first generation students, as they think about college, cost is at like either number one, number two, or number three. It's got to be the top three for a lot of first generation college students. So in your mind and in your approach, you said cost definitely factored into where you wanted to go. Did that narrow down your choices to what schools made your final cut?
I think that was what helped build into just picking, I know I definitely want to go to a SUNY. And then from there, it was Googling what's the best SUNY and then just working with the first answer I got. And then the other side of that was one of the best, like one of the like more prestigious SUNY schools that people tend to talk up a lot is SUNY Stony Brook, which I grew up 15 minutes away from, and I said, not there. I don't want to be here anymore. And ultimately that took me to Binghamton because Binghamton has this whole persona of the tagline they use a lot is we're the premier public Ivy. Sort of yes. And that's sort of the marketing persona that the school takes. And I saw that, and I saw that they had psychology, which is what I thought I wanted to major in at the time. And I said, okay, good school, has my major, SUNY, all right.
Yeah.
And I never toured, I never visited. I went for accepted students day and we tried to pay my deposit in cash. And they said, you can't do that. And we said, well, we'll try. We tried.
So for for the audience listening who may not know the term SUNY, what is that?
SUNY is State University of New York. It's the state college system for New York State. In addition to the other side of that for New York specifically is there's CUNY, City University of New York, which
Mhm.
is the public school system within specifically New York City.
All right, right on. Thank you so much for clarifying that.
Of course.
So on your end, you already covered a little bit about how you prepared for college. What other additional steps did you take to prepare as you narrowed down your choices, as you kind of started focusing on your path on getting admitted? What other things did you do to prepare for college?
Almost nothing.
Almost
Um,
nothing.
because this is, I think, one of the biggest like first gen moves that I made was I didn't know what you were supposed to do to prepare for school. So I just didn't. I said,
Hmm.
all right, I applied to the school, I picked
Hmm.
the school, I told them I'm going.
Hmm.
What else is there? And eventually my sister was like, we need to go shopping. We need to buy things for your dorm.
Shopping.
We need to we need to get you ready to be there. And I said, okay, I didn't think about any of that. And she said, I know. That's why I need to take you.
And again, it's such a very mystifying process for a lot of first generation college students,
Mhm.
and even students that may not have a family attend college before, is that you don't know that these are the things that you're supposed to be thinking about because, right? Dorm, what is that? Preparing, what is that? What does that even look like?
If I didn't have someone tell me to my face, we need to go and buy you furniture, I would not have brought furniture. I
Mhm.
would have brought like bedding stuff and like toiletries, but I don't
Yeah.
think I would have brought anything else. And I would
No,
have
seriously. Eh,
but
yeah.
yeah. Um no, I'm sorry. That's the only thing I have to say about
No,
that
no,
one.
no, you're good. You're good. So in that preparation, did you get to look at any college, visit any colleges, anything like that?
I didn't know you were supposed to visit colleges.
Oh no.
I guess I just missed the memo at some
Yeah.
point, but I didn't
Hmm.
know you were supposed to do that. So we never scheduled any college visits. The only time I saw any college was a field trip we did in like my junior year of high school where we went to one of the labs on Stony Brook's campus
Hmm.
and going to Binghamton for accepted students day to pay my deposit because I'd already decided I was
Wow.
going there.
Yeah.
Any other, it was never even a thought in my mind of like, oh, I want to go on tours, but I can't because of X, Y, and Z. It was just, I didn't know you should.
Oh
It
wow.
never occurred to me that any
Yeah.
college would be different from any other college.
Wow. Um, so describe your final year in high school. What was that like for you?
So, final year of high school was definitely, I think it was bittersweet in a way, because
Hmm.
I think I had a very common experience to like younger queer people where I said, high school's kind of terrible and I don't like it here. And the instant that I finish this and do something else, the better.
Hmm.
But looking back, it's also filled with a lot of really good memories of being personally invited to be a co-captain on the fencing team. It was having some really genuinely good, close friendships that I um, really don't have as much contact with basically any of them as I would have thought that I might have at that point in my life. Uh, and really just a lot of small little things that made a big difference. Just people that I knew I could talk to and be honest with.
Hmm.
Um, at that point, I had like gotten a little bit more used to like the idea of performing. So I had performed in like my school's Broadway night, which I was always so terrified to do anything related to like theater that doing that in front of like an auditorium was, I think, a huge breakthrough moment for me.
Hmm.
But it's just a lot of like doing my best to just do stuff. And I don't think there was
Hmm.
that level of intention when I was younger of, oh, I'm going to do this because it'll make me more well-rounded or it'll push my boundaries. But it was just, oh, this is an opportunity. I gotta do that. Okay, I'll do that too. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So talk about that moment you graduated from high school. What was that moment like for you and for your family?
So I think it was so my two older siblings, my oldest sibling, my brother, he didn't finish high school.
Hmm.
Um, but at that point when I had graduated, my sister was a college grad, um, and probably one of like a very small handful of people like in our generation of the family to like have started the college thing.
Hmm.
And so for me, graduating, I think it was a bigger moment for some of my family members than it was for me.
Hmm.
So like I'll say like for example, my mom's gonna be proud of every single thing I do.
Yeah.
I'm very blessed to have that relationship with her because I know not everyone does. Um, but I think for her it was very emotional of like my youngest child is gonna go
Oh, yeah.
out and like go on to the next phase of their life and all of
Hmm.
that. Um, for me, I was a very cocky teenager who said, "Yeah, of course I'm graduating. Why wouldn't I?"
Right.
And I think I was still a little bit like oblivious to some of like those layers of like my family's experience that led to where I was.
Hmm.
Um, but for me, I think for me, it was less of like the excitement of graduating and more of why am I only graduating in seventh in my class? I should be higher than that. Um, So I still had some issues to work out at that point. I had
Hmm.
like some stuff to work out in my brain around like what my priorities were with
Hmm.
how to think about important moments. But it's good to look back on it and see like how your thinking changes over time.
Absolutely. I find it wonderful, right, when parents are able to celebrate with you and say, very proud of your accomplishments. Also, but that also that inner reflection of I could have done a little bit more, or there's when I reflect on my high school experience, I'm like, you know what? I could have put a little bit more effort on that. I could have put a little bit more on my academic effort. But totally, hear you on the getting things accomplished and then kind of getting ready for the next phase. How did you prepare for that transition, by the way, for high school from a high school graduate to first year college student? What did that look like for you?
Stop me if you've heard this one before.
Here we go.
Almost nothing. Because I
I'm,
said, I'm already really good at school.
hmm.
It's not going to be any different.
Hmm.
Like everyone always says, oh, it's gonna be so different, but like I'm good at what I do, so how is it gonna be a huge difference?
Hmm.
And I didn't know that there was like any sort of special preparations I was really gonna be doing outside of just like I was very ready to leave home. So like I
Hmm.
wasn't really dealing with like any preparatory homesickness. I think the
Hmm.
thing that really did change the game was uh maybe a month before I graduated from high school, I got a letter in the mail in this bright pink envelope with the
Oh.
Binghamton letterhead on it
Uh-huh.
that said you are formally invited to join the Trio Student Support Services program. We are doing a week-long like extended orientation program in the summer in July. Please come. And I almost threw it out.
Oh, oh no.
And my mom, as I was going to like toss it, my mom goes, "What is that?" And I was like, "I don't know. It's something from the school. They want to." I think verbatim, I said, "I think they want to give me a longer orientation because we're poor." And she said, "Sign up for it."
Uh-huh.
And I said, "Yeah, all right." And then I signed up for it, and
Hmm.
um, I did end up going to that orientation and
That's
it made
awesome.
a huge difference for me. It that was my first like real step in joining Trio was this letter that it's a very intentional thing. They send it in the bright pink envelope because they're
Hmm.
like someone's gonna notice this.
Yes.
And luckily my mom
Very
did
cool.
because I think my experience would be a lot different if she didn't stop me and say sign up for that right now.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. That's amazing. Um, so talk to me a little bit about your college experience. Was college more or less what you expected that first year?
I think it was definitely more. Um, So I was very lucky that through that program, uh, At Binghamton, we call it the Student Support Services Summer Program, S4P.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so S4P was huge for me because I was able to make when I was younger, I was not very good at making friends. I was very good at passively existing in places until
Mm-hmm.
people congregated around and then going, all right, I can work with this group. But like being really intentional about making friends was not something I was good at.
Mm.
Being part of that program, it was around 60 of us all together for 6 straight days. And I had to be really intentional about like, okay, I need to talk to people. I need to interact with people because this is not an opportunity I'm going to have again to be in such a small space with people who actually know what it's like to be
Absolutely.
walking in with these kinds of identities.
Right.
Um, and I made a lot of really close friends in that short week. A couple of them I still talk to regularly. Two of them are in my game group that we meet online every week. Every Wednesday night, we meet up and we say hi.
Mm-hmm.
And then another one of my friends, she lives 2 hours from me, and we are constantly going back and forth and visiting each other. And these are like relationships that I would never have had if not for that. And really, I think the whole of my first year was made all the better because of that, because uh, by the time that I was graduating from high school, I had been living with depression that I had not told anyone about
Mm-hmm.
since I was around 11 years old. So that was
Mm-hmm.
around like 6, 7 years of it by the time that I was even entering college.
Mm-hmm.
And I hit my breaking point a good few times in that
Yeah.
first year. And having people that cared about me and could actually notice that something was up, I think made a huge difference of people who would reach out and say, "You're not being yourself. What's up?"
Mm-hmm.
We're sitting down and we're talking about this.
Yeah.
Um, just people who were like very invested in me, I think is what made the whole experience that much more. And that was friends, that was peers, that was like the staff in my trio program. But I think it was really just like I never expected to have that close of relationships with people in that way. And the fact that it happened so naturally and so quickly, I think
Mm-hmm.
like really changed the whole game for me.
Wow. And we'll get to your trio experience here in just a moment, but can you tell us
Yeah.
what helped your decision in majoring in human development studies? Because that's a broad field, isn't it?
Yeah, so human development, as it's handled at Binghamton, is an interdisciplinary major. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, I always describe it as if you took psychology and sociology and like a little bit of evolutionary bio and you put them in a jar and you shook them up, then you get human development.
It's a good description.
So I started as psychology because I had the nebulous goal of I want to help people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No idea what that meant. And then I took sociology my very first semester and I said, that's really interesting. I love that. And it actually was a trio thing because every month I was required to meet with my trio counselor once a month.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I met with her and I said, this is what I like about sociology, this is what I think I might want to do with my life, every single time she said, you really sound like a human development major. You should think about human development. You should talk to the people in human development. And
Mm-hmm.
the first couple times I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to talk to people. I don't
Yeah.
want to try this. I don't know what that is. And then eventually she said it enough times that I said, okay, I'll sign up for it and I'll take the intro class and we'll see what happens. And then
Mhm.
I took the intro class and I loved it.
Wow. And that's amazing, right? When you take the class that really draws you into the field. Talk a little bit about that course. Like, what subject was it that really drew you in? What was it, the topic? Was it the instructor? Was the course experience just period?
I think it was a mixture of the instructor and the content. So
Mm-hmm.
the instructor, Dr. Ann Merriweather, the GOAT, love her. But she was, I think in many ways, she was who I aspired to be
Mm.
because she was this, I want to say like 6'3", like older woman, worked on
Mm-hmm.
a like when she wasn't being a professor, she owned an alpaca farm with her husband.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just like this professional odd woman who
Mm.
came in and was incredibly genuine about her whole deal. And I said, I'm obsessed. I love you. I want to know everything
Oh.
about you. And then throughout that class, it was us talking about all these things of like, we spent a week talking about breastfeeding, and we spent a week talking about like the different alternative forms of birthing that isn't just like laying on a table and being in stirrups. We talked about um intersex people and the like aggressive regulation and violence that is done by the state against intersex people. And we talked about just all these different things all at once.
Totally.
And it really folded in, and she made it so seamless that like all of this is interconnected because it's all human, and this is
Mm.
all what the society we live in is. And just every class, I was like, wow, everything's terrible, but I want to learn more.
Wow. So the curiosity really drew you in too. That's amazing.
Absolutely.
So I should have asked you this question earlier, but did any of your interest from high school, like fencing and just doing a lot of engagement, did that carry over into college?
So fencing, Binghamton had a fencing team, and I never joined or even went to a meeting.
Uh-huh.
Their meetings were at 9 p.m.
Ooh, that's late.
On I think like Tuesdays or Wednesdays because they had to
Mm.
have it late enough that kids that were in lab classes could go.
Oh, I
And a
see.
lot of labs would be 6 to 9 p.m. And so in my freshman year, I was like, well, I'm probably going to get overwhelmed with work. So I don't want to do a thing that has me up until like 11 p.m.
No
So
kidding.
I'm just not going to go. And I do regret that. I do wish that I had spent more time there. But I think like my environmental club sort of like leanings
Hmm.
pivoted into I ended up being super involved in our women's student union, which was the feminist organization on campus. I think they've since changed their name to, I think they're the BU Feminist Collective now to be more gender inclusive in their name.
Hmm.
But that was like my political home ground. I felt so comfortable just going in every week and talking about whatever. And then at the end of
Yeah.
my first year, one of the e-board members tapped me and said, "Have you considered running for e-board?" And I said, "No." And she said, "You should." And I said, "Oh, okay." And then I
Yeah,
did. And then I was on e-board for 3 years.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Do you remember what was your favorite college course? Now, you talked a little bit about that human development science course, or that course that really drew you in. But were there other courses that really broadened your perspective, or you really kind of found more interest in?
Yeah. Um, in my major, I would say that my favorite class was called The Politics of Education with
Oh,
Dr.
that's
Denise Yull.
uh-huh.
And it was exactly what it sounds like. We would just talk. Everything in my major was once a week, 3 hour long classes. So we had time to like really get into like deep conversations about whatever the topic was.
Hmm.
And so we talked about like racism in education and classism in education. We talked
Wow.
about like the punishment gap between black girls and everyone that wasn't a black girl. We talked about like the growing like police presence in schools, and we just talked about like every possible angle of like education that you could think of.
Hmm.
And so like that was great. And then Dr. Yell was also just really good at like running a 3 hour class where she was like good at incorporating activities. There was like a sign up every week that was like everyone would bring in throughout the semester, everyone would bring in a food item or a drink, and then she
Hmm.
would order pizza every class. So we would have like our own little like sit down dinner as a class every week. And like that was just huge because she actually respected us as people who needed variety in 3 hours and couldn't just be lectured at.
Right.
So that was huge. And Dr. Yell was, I think I would wager to say she was my favorite professor while I was there. I took 3 classes with her and TA'd for her
Hmm.
because I just wanted to hear everything she had to say. She started out in engineering and pivoted into the education zone through I don't even know how, but
Hmm.
she just like had such a wealth of experience, and she'd lived in Binghamton for so long that she could tell us so much about like how the things we were talking about factored into the area. And she would invite people who did like community organizing
Hmm.
in the local area and bring them into the class to talk to us about like, this is the kind of work that I do, and this is Like, let me give you a case study of something that I do in my day to day. How would you approach this? And
Wow.
like that was just huge for like making the learning real.
That's awesome. So we already covered a little bit about how you learned about Trio Student Support Services. What's the thing that really helped you transition into SSS, and what you like, what really you enjoyed about SSS?
So at Binghamton, the SSS office it's big and it's spacious, and students are told a bunch throughout the summer program, please come to the office, please hang out, use the printer, it's free, unlike all the other printers on campus.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but like this is your space, make it your space.
Hmm.
And I take things very literal. I take things at their face value. So when someone says, this is your space, make it your space, I said, okay, I will do that.
Hmm.
And I went to that space every single day. I had my chair. That was where I sat every single day.
A
Um,
designated chair.
I would do the majority of my schoolwork in that room. I would hang out with most of my friends in that room.
Hmm.
And then at the end of my first semester, there was an application to be a peer mentor for the program. And I said, I'm pretty good at that. I could probably do that.
Hmm.
And I was very lucky to be accepted. And I stayed a peer mentor in various ways for the rest of my time there. And that was like another huge hook was once I once I had a professional connection too, that it was like, okay, this is where I work, this is where I play, this is where I study, this is my go-to spot.
Hmm.
And just became like that was my home. And my mom still struggles to remember that it's SSS, but she always remembers, like, she would always ask me about, like, oh, the trio people
The
and
trio
how are
people.
they doing? And then I remember when I graduated, she came to campus and I showed her the office and she was like, I thought it was all students. I didn't realize adults worked here. And I was like, yes, mom, it's a federal program. How did you not? I've worked
Oh,
with them on campus every
yeah.
summer.
Well, at least that got cleared up for your mom. That's amazing
Yes.
though. That's amazing. Um, so how did this program help you in college? Because I know for a lot of students that when they learn about Trio, they're like, oh, they help you in this way in academics, but specifically for you, what did Trio do for you?
So for me, I think that I think for me the academics probably was not the biggest part of it because
Oh,
I
interesting.
was um like I said, I was very aggressive about my schoolwork from a very young age. And like
Hmm.
I feel like even if it was just like straight academics all the way through, I think I probably could have done college fine.
Hmm.
Um, if I did not have the close personal relationships that I formed, I would have burned out and probably dropped out very early in that experience because
Hmm.
I desperately needed those people around me. And I think that professionally was huge too because the my counselors were the kind of people who would just sit down and say, "All right, you keep saying you want to help people. What does that
Hmm.
mean? What does that
Hmm.
look like? What do you actually want to do? How do we get you there?" And would just have these long, pointed conversations with me about what does life after this look like, and encourage me to think about that early and to be intentional about the things I was doing. So a lot of it was like the mental health care from the staff that I desperately needed, just being able to trust people enough to say things to them that I had never really said to
Hmm.
adults in any context.
Hmm.
It was the friendships that I formed. It was all of the professional experiences that I got from being with them. I think that just like it was, I can never overstate how much Trio changed my life, and probably, if we're being fully accurate, probably did save my life at least once or twice,
Yeah.
just in terms of like stopping me from exploding while I
Hmm.
was there.
Hmm. That is amazing. I feel like from what you're telling me that Trio SSS not only provided the academic support, which again, like you said, it wasn't just about that, but it provided much more than that. It helped you form community. It helped you find your voice inside the realm of academics, which is amazing. So, in what other areas did Trio SSS really support you?
I think Trio was I think I had done like leadership things before.
Mm-hmm.
But I think trio is where I actually became a leader in a meaningful way.
Wow.
And that was first it was being a peer mentor, and then it was being promoted and being lead trio mentor and
Mm-hmm.
running our summer program. It was during our very first National Trio Day, we had a keynote speaker, and I was like, wow, it'd be really cool if we had like some sort of student speaker series where we could like hear from other students and know that we're not alone. And it
Mm-hmm.
was the staff saying, we should do that. You should run that. Let's do that. And
Yeah,
now at Binghamton, as an annual tradition, part of National Trio Day is Trio Talks, which is a program that I spearheaded because they told me this is a good idea and you should do it.
that's amazing.
Um, and it was just moments like that where it was people just genuinely believing in me and saying, you should do this. The things that you're saying are worthwhile. The ideas that you have are good, and they're going to change things for the better for other people. And you should chase that. And I think that I had never truly believed that about myself before having people say it so frequently and so
Mhm.
vehemently as the folks in Trio did, both the staff that pushed me and my friends who were constantly gassing me up and saying, no, you should do that.
Absolutely. I find that the trail community is very effective at helping you realize the type of leader that you can be, and two, hyping you up to do it.
Absolutely.
So, Jasper, can you talk to us about the moment you graduate from college? What did that moment mean to you and your family?
Yes. I graduating from college was definitely more meaningful to me than high school by a huge margin.
Hmm.
And I actually applied to be the speaker at my graduation. Um, and I was denied. But that same professor I mentioned, Dr. Yull, she actually came up to me about a week later and she said, I heard you didn't get selected as speaker. Don't worry, I'm working on something for you. And I said, I don't know what that means, but okay. And apparently her and a bunch of the other HDev professors got together, and as the faculty, they were able to select who's the standard bearer for the program.
Hmm.
And they selected me. And Dr. Yell's words, she said, well, you have to do something. You can't be graduating here and not do something for the for the procession. And I was like, that is so touching and huge. Um, so I was able to walk down as standard bearer, and I graduated, and I'm very proud to toot my own horn and say I graduated summa cum laude because
Amazing.
was I was aggressive. I really cared about what I was doing, and I made sure that that showed in everything that I did. And I have this one like snapshot memory of standing and holding the standard before I put it into like the little holder that it had. And
Hmm.
I turned and I looked to the section where all my family was sitting because they got to sit in a special little section because I was one of the standard bearers. And I just saw my sister just weeping where she was like my
Oh,
mom was crying, my sister was weeping,
yeah.
and
Oh.
just like that moment crystallized for me of like this is so much bigger than just me.
Hmm.
This is
Hmm.
huge. And my sister has always been my biggest cheerleader. Like she has been a second mom to me in so many ways. And I think I can be candid about this because she will not listen to this because my sister hates
Oh
podcasts.
no.
Um, but but like these are things that like I find so hard to say to her. But she has always been such a huge pillar in my life, and to see her so overtaken in that moment, I was like, it really made a huge impact on me of I've done something here today, and I've done something that really matters.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. And I hope your sister does get to hear this. Uh, I think if
I'll try
you
my hardest.
if you let her know like at what minute mark, I find that some people just listen to the podcast and say, if you would mention me at this minute mark, I'll listen to it. Um, so Jasper, did you know what career you wanted to pursue? I mean, college graduation was already upon you. At one point, I've talked to so many trio folks and trio students, participants. They say that once graduation starts hitting, that you feel the pressure of trying to find a career.
Yeah. So at that point, I had already decided on my career. Um, and I actually decided in the summer between my first and second years of undergrad, I was working for the same extended orientation, the S4P program with Binghamton Trio. And I had this moment of looking down at like my group of student mentees. I had
Hmm
16 that year. And I remember looking down at them, having fun on the last day and just like partying before they all had to get up in the morning and get on their buses. And I said, I want to do this forever.
Oh
This
wow.
is this is what I'm supposed to do, I think. And I said as much to one of the counselors, and she said, I mean, you can. That's
Hmm
what all of us do. This is our job,
Yeah.
always. And I said, oh. And from there, it turned into a very intentional push of what do I have to do to work in Trio? And so
hmm
by the time that I was graduating, I had already confirmed which graduate program I was going to for higher ed. And I went for higher ed specifically because, well, I need a master's to work in most SSS programs.
hmm
So
hmm
I suppose I will get a graduate degree.
So is that when you decided like grad school had to be in the picture?
Yep. Because before that point, before I went to undergrad, I didn't know grad school was a thing. I thought there
Hmm
was med school and law school, and everyone else just got a degree and then went on with their lives. I didn't
Uh-huh.
know there was a whole grad school complex you had to consider in addition to everything.
Yeah. Dang. So realizing that you needed a master's, you had to do a lot of research. You decided to go for a master's degree. Where did you ultimately go to pursue that?
Ultimately, I went to Syracuse University for my master's degree, and I was there for 2 years, which largely coincided with the beginning of the COVID-19
Oh,
pandemic.
that's
Ha ha
right. Oh
ha.
my gosh. How was that? I mean, that must have been challenging.
It was bad, is the
I'm so
short
sorry to hear
answer.
that.
Um, no, I mean, I think that Syracuse was an interesting experience, is
Hmm
really the best word for it, because I had a graduate assistantship in the Office of Event and Technical Services. So we handled all of like the large scale events, and a lot of my responsibility was supervising student staff. Uh, our office had a staff of like 70-ish students at any given time who
hmm
would run like lights and sound and venue and projection and video for all the major events on campus. And Syracuse is a mid-sized school of around like 20,000.
Well,
So
yeah,
like
sizable.
events could range from like, oh, it's like this conference room needs like to have the lights turned on and the projector set up,
Hmm
to this is a ballroom that we need to seat 700 people on the floor. The tables need to be set up as
Oh my
quickly as
gosh.
possible.
Yeah.
And so it taught me a lot
Gosh.
about like time management, how to manage myself effectively. At that point, I was becoming a lot more comfortable in naming like myself as a physically disabled person. And
Mm.
so I had to get a lot better at communicating what my limits were, because when you're moving 8 foot round tables by yourself and rolling them along the ground, you really need to be able to tell the other people, I'm gonna go take a 5 minute breather because my legs can't support me anymore. I'll be back in a
hmm
few.
hmm
Because if you don't do that, then you collapse on the job and it is worse for you and for everyone else too. So Syracuse was a lot of teaching me how to self-advocate and how to be specific about my needs. I think were some of the biggest lessons that I ended up taking away from being there.
You decided to go for your higher education administration degree. Why this area?
Um, Largely, I really loved doing a lot of things that I did in college. I loved being
Hmm
a tutor, I loved being a mentor, I loved programming, I loved being part of the Women's Student Union. I really was finding that I loved education as a concept, but the idea of working with high school and middle schoolers was terrifying to me. It's important work, it's good work, it's
Definitely,
work that I
certainly.
am not capable of doing, and I admire
hmm
the people who can.
hmm
Um, and so like higher ed really just felt like a good confluence of everything. And ultimately it was that guiding point of I want to work in trio was
Hmm.
a huge part of, well, the higher ed administration seems like as good a place as any.
Absolutely. Was your undergrad and graduate school experience the same?
I wouldn't say so. I think graduate school was a lot harder, and I think it would have been even without navigating it during the beginning of a global pandemic.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
but we were in a cohort models. There were 15 of us, so it was much smaller. It was much more intimate,
Hmm.
and it also meant that I felt like I think I think grad school brought back some of that chip on my shoulder kind of mentality. I felt like I was still always trying to prove myself. And that mentality was not good for me, I think. And really, what it came down to was I also moved from the space that I carved out for myself at Binghamton. I was able to loudly and aggressively exist as a trans person.
Hmm.
And was I accepted at all times? Absolutely not. Did I have my fair share of troubles at my undergrad experience? Yes.
Hmm.
But I had a very robust support network and I had a lot of like, I felt very in control of that experience. In Syracuse, I did not feel nearly as much control. And
Hmm.
so when things happened, I didn't feel like I had people I could turn to the same degree. And I didn't really have that same uh I didn't have that same feeling of I know what to do and I know who I am when I was there.
Hmm.
I think that grad school, I think it's a really important thing, and I don't think that people should be scared away from doing it. But I think that there is an honest conversation about it is a different ballpark and it
Certainly.
requires its own whole set of preparations and understandings that I don't think I fully had when I walked into it.
What did you enjoy most about your grad school experience?
What did I enjoy most about my grad school experience? Working with students. So while I was there, I had my graduate assistantship, which was there for the whole 2 years, where I supervised student staff and I worked with that staff of around 70. And I also directly supervised our four student leads.
Hmm.
Um, and I ended up being super close with them, and they were just a great bunch of people. Um, and that was huge for me to have like that sort of one-on-one connection with a lot of them. And then I was also able to do two semester-long internships. One was with our College of Engineering and Computer Science, where I did like success coaching with students in
Hmm.
that sphere. And that was
Hmm.
just a really different experience to everything else I'd done. So that was big for me. And then I was in our first year and transfer programming office where I mentioned during my interview with them, I really wanted to work with first gen students. And they said, we're trying to amp up our first gen programming. You should be in the room for all of those conversations and you should have a say and you should really be loud about it and tell
Hmm.
us your ideas.
Hmm.
And it was those times where I was able to get into that space of, all right, the things I'm saying matter and they're important and I'm actively being encouraged, let's get into it. And it was those times that I could really connect one-on-one with students and feel that sort of connection and feel that I was doing something worthwhile. That was the big positive while I was there, I think.
Wonderful.
Go
So,
on.
as you were already saying earlier in the podcast, that you were looking for a way to get into a trio career, and you said masters is the way to do it.
Yes.
Um, how did you land the trio position? And yeah, how did that all happen for you?
So when I began my job search, I actually reached out to one of my old counselors, Marissa. She's the associate director for SSS at Binghamton. And I said, Marissa, I'm starting my job search. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm doing my best to figure it out. And she said, I can send you every job that I am aware of that people are hiring for. And I
Hmm.
said, that's great. That's huge.
Hmm.
And she really did mean it when she said every job. She was sending me jobs in Alaska, in California, in Florida, and I was
Oh,
like, Marissa, I'm
wow.
not moving that far. And she said, I'm still going to send you everything.
Right,
You
right.
never know. And I said, okay. Um, But ultimately, location ended up being huge for me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, most of the people that I'm close with in this world are in New York State. And so staying in New York State was important to me. And at the time that I was applying, the SSS program at Utica had just gotten approved a few months prior, and they had just hired their first director and assistant director
Mm-hmm.
and said, we need another person to round out the team. Uh, and I said, hello, here I am.
Yes,
And
I have arrived.
I've arrived. And in conversations since then, my director, Susan, she's told me a huge part of the hiring consideration was just the depth of knowledge you had about Trio. We needed
That's
someone
wonderful.
on board who knew how
Right.
these programs normally work and what best practices are and how to get involved in the broader community. And you knew those things and you made it really obvious that you did. And I said, cool. Because all that time that I spent in Trio, like, yes, it was good for me in terms of like getting skills and getting involved and all of that, but it also was directly beneficial to my ultimate career goals because it showed people you have the exact knowledge and skill set that we need to do what we're doing effectively.
Absolutely. So you work as a retention and academic support coordinator. Can you talk about your job and what does that mean?
Um, so it is a very long title that I don't like, but my but really, it's a little bit of everything. So
Mhm.
I hire and supervise our peer tutors in our office. I spearheaded and ran our peer mentor program. I have uh, a lot of my hand is in the assessment and data organization of our office because I love spreadsheets so much. Um, and then there's a lot of just like academic and social programming that I do because a huge part of retention is making people feel like they belong. So I do things like tarot nights and game nights, arts and crafts nights, STEM day, just like stuff to get people engaged and having conversations with each other. Uh, and I mean, it's fun. It's good
Yeah,
work, but it's also just fun.
wonderful. So you got to tell me a little bit more about the thing that you enjoy most about your work with Trio. What is that? What do you enjoy most about it?
It's the students. It's always going to be the students. And I think a huge part of that is because I really like working with young adults because many of them are so unabashed in telling you exactly what they want,
Hmm.
exactly what they think things should look like. Um,
Hmm.
my office is our academic center, so it's like an open floor plan, and my desk is just in one corner. So basically, every day I have people coming in and saying, are you doing something? No? Cool. I'm going to talk to you right now. It's just like a matter of, okay, awesome. Let's get into it. What do you want to talk about? Um, but just having this constant energy around me of people who are very enthusiastic about what they're doing, who are trying their absolute best, who have goals and really just need that extra leg up to get towards them.
Hmm.
Um, and I'd be lying if I said that seeing little reflections of myself running around wasn't gratifying. But
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
I tell them all the time. I tell students, I see a lot of myself. I see a lot of my young self in you. And it's just great.
Absolutely. What has been your greatest success in your work, and what has been a challenge?
Greatest success. I think an experience I'm really proud of as far as professional work is the regional organization for TRIO programs for my area, AEEE, the Association of Equity and Excellence in Education. Um, they have their regional conference every year,
Hmm.
and my first time going to that conference, I presented. Uh,
Wow.
and I just threw in an application and I was like, well, if they don't pick me, they don't pick me, but I might as well try. And it just felt very good to fly. Well, first of all, it was in Puerto Rico, so that was great.
Oh wow. Oh wow. Yeah, yeah.
So flying out to Puerto Rico and then having a room full of people who wanted to know what I had to say That was great. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Biggest challenge, I think, just in the same through line of everything else, has just been learning how to manage and take care of myself. This is my first adult job, and learning how to take care of the balance of it all, of being an adult who has a home to take care of and like a brain to exercise and make sure it doesn't turn to mush by watching TV the entire night when I come home, and
Right.
also being ready for work and making food and just
Right.
all the little things that go into the care and feeding of an adult human.
Absolutely.
Uh, Balancing all that has been a challenge, and I've grown a lot and I've gotten a lot better, but I'd be lying if I said I had it down from day one.
I don't think anybody does.
No.
Nobody has it down on day one. Jasper, can you compare and contrast being a professional, trio professional, versus being a student in trio?
Hmm. I think the biggest contrast is, for lack of a better term, seeing how the sausage gets made. Where when I was a student,
Hmm.
I was really involved and I was on a lot of committees and I did all the like stuff, but I still only had as much perspective as I could through those interactions.
Yeah.
Working in the field now, it's like, oh, okay, every time one of the staff members made something happen and it seemed so easy, there were maybe years of developing relationships with people in other offices to make that easy.
Hmm.
Or
Hmm.
I'm going to an event and I'm taking it for granted, but maybe I don't know how much time it takes to prepare that on the back end and to actually
Hmm.
execute it properly. And really realizing, like, I thought I knew how much went into it when I was a student worker, and I was like, I'm an adult. I'm part of, like, I know what's going on. And
Right.
then, like, now as a professional on the other side, seeing, oh, I thought I knew what was up, but not really. And I would say comparison wise, it's still fun.
Yeah,
It's definitely it's harder sometimes and it's more draining sometimes because you're carrying a lot of people's like hopes and dreams and expectations on you,
certainly.
but you have to laugh.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I think when I was a student staff member, when I was a student, my focus was always how do I have fun and how do I get the most out of this? And now as a professional, I'm saying how do I make the students have fun and how do I help them get the most out of this?
Absolutely.
The goals are the same.
Hmm. So, kind of a nice segue into this next question is, what advice would you give to pre-college or college students in trio programs or thinking about joining trio program?
Um, Whenever someone asks me what advice I have for younger people, I always give the same piece of advice, and it is to do things with a purpose.
Mm,
And purpose is something that we have misconstrued a little bit in the society we live in right now, I personally think, where people hear purpose and they say, okay, how do I extract value out of this? How do I get a tangible skill? How do I get the credit? How do I get paid for this? And it's like, it doesn't have to be that. It sure can be that, but it doesn't have to be that. I think like sometimes the purpose of an activity is I need to rest. Sometimes the purpose is I need to have fun or my head's going to explode. And those are good and noble purposes to bring into activities,
hmm.
but making sure that you are thinking ahead and just not doing things idly because you can't think of what to do.
Yeah.
But even if you're just saying, I'm going to stop for 5 minutes and do nothing else, I'm just going to sit and breathe for 5 minutes. And the purpose of that is to just let my brain vent a little bit of steam out so that I can continue on with my day like a normal person. That is a good and important purpose, but you're doing it with intention.
Good advice. What about advice for folks who are thinking about returning to college? Either they've dropped out or they're thinking about going to college, or those folks that are non-traditional students that have taken immediately after high school or haven't graduated from high school, got their GED, and are thinking maybe college is the right path I want to take. What advice do you have for them?
Ask lots of questions. If you know the school that you're considering going back to, call a couple of the offices and just say, hey, I'm a prospective student. I've been out of the game for however long. What do you think the most important steps are for me to take? What are the things that you think I should consider? What are the resources that I can make use of when I join on?
Hmm.
And if the answers aren't to your liking, find somewhere else.
Hmm.
And but it's just a matter of like know what you're walking into because, oh God, G.I. Joe, knowing is half the battle. I mean, that
Good
really is what
reference.
it comes
That's a
down
nice
to.
reference. Okay, I'm going to ask a little bit of a notch up of a difficult question. What advice do you have for trio professionals who are listening to this podcast?
Um, as someone in my third year of being a trio professional, I'm not sure how much I can offer, but I would just say, I mean, take care of yourselves. You're
I love
doing
that.
good
That's
and
good advice.
important and hard work, and that only happens if you take care of yourself. Um, find a hobby. If you don't have a hobby right now, please, dear God, find a hobby.
Hmm.
Um, And if anything, do something that's just for you. Try and do something that when people ask you, "Oh, what did you do last night?" you can go, "Oh, nothing." And you know in your head, "I did this thing and it's just for me."
Hmm. Hmm.
Because something about that for me is really nice of just, I don't need to tell everyone everything. I can have my own little parts of my life that are private to me. Because I think trio work involves so much vulnerability and openness on the part of both the student and the professional.
Hmm.
Having things that belong to only you, I think helps with that creation of healthy boundary and a sense of identity outside of the work.
That's wonderful. And another wonderful segue to this next question is, what is one word you would use to describe yourself?
Let me think. One word I would use to describe myself. Um, I mean, I think really what it comes down to is goofy. Um, if I when Animal Crossing New Horizons was like the big thing on everyone's mind during the
Hmm.
pandemic because that was the only way we could see each other. The game has a little prompt where it's like, "What's your tagline that's on your passport that people see when you go to their island?" And without thinking, I typed into mine, "A real goof troop of a human being." And I think that really does that stands true with like what my whole vibe is at all times is
I love that.
I am not going to be less goofy, less silly, less fun for the sake of professionalism. I'm not going to do it to put on airs or to act like I'm better than anyone. Uh, being goofy is what makes me good at my job because you learn best when you're having fun and you are
Absolutely.
most engaged and most likely to stay somewhere if you're having fun. And that is, I think people underestimate the sheer value of it, and just being genuine and goofy is a huge part of it.
So I think people who hopefully they've read the title of the podcast because the title of your podcast is gonna be goofy. They know
Absolutely.
exactly
Excellent.
what to expect going in. What shows, movies, podcasts, books, or other forms of entertainment are you currently consuming, and what would you recommend to the audience?
Yeah. Right now, at my sister's recommendation, I am reading Lisa C's Lady Tan's Circle of Women. It's set in 1400s China, and it focuses on a woman doctor. She is part of the nobility, and she develops this reputation as a woman who specializes in treating other women. Uh, because at that time, male doctors could not be in the same room as a female patient. They had to have a go-between,
Mm,
ask all the questions for them, recite all the answers, describe what they were seeing. Uh, and so, like, she was able to have this perspective and ability to treat people that was unparalleled by the official doctors at the time. And that it's a really good read. I'm almost done with
that's
it. I'm probably
wonderful.
going to finish it tonight or tomorrow. Uh, what I would recommend is I recently read A Guest in the House by Emily Carroll. It's a graphic novel about a woman who is married to a widower who starts to see the ghost of her husband's dead wife.
Oh wow.
And Emily Carroll is an incredibly accomplished like horror comics writer,
Hmm.
and I love everything I've ever read by her. And reading her first like full length book was huge for me. If you are a fan of horror, I highly recommend it. If you like haunted houses, highly recommend it. Um, I've gotten into a huge graphic novel kick this year, and big ups to Emily Carroll.
Wonderful. Jasper, it has been a true pleasure to speak with you today. I hope we get to have you on again in the future, maybe do a panel with you or a follow-up episode. That would be really, really great.
Absolutely. Anything you need from me, I would love to come back.
Wonderful. So Jasper, we have a tradition on the Let's Talk Trio podcast. We're calling it a tradition now because it's official, where we have the guests sign off. Do you care to do the honors?
Absolutely. All right. Hi, I'm Jasper Wojtach, and I'm an alum of the Trio SSS program at Binghamton University. I graduated with my bachelor's in human development and got my master's in higher ed administration. I work as a retention and academic support coordinator for Trio SSS at Utica University, and now and forever, Trio works.
That was our guest, Jasper Wojtach, who is a Trio Student Support Services staff member and proud Trio alum. Jasper, thank you so much for being on the podcast and for sharing your Trio story. Remember, if you would like to be on the Let's Talk Trio podcast or know a staff, advocate, participant, or alumni, send us an email at letstalktrio@gmail.com. That email again is letstalktrio@gmail.com. A huge thanks to our sponsors, Angelica Villalpando, Dr. Jamie Motley, Dr. Ryan Barone, Dr. Jeff Naputi, Angelica Valdez, Rosario Riley, Felicia Rivera, TrioJoblist.com, Jaded Electronics, NOSOTROS Education Center, Cambridge Educational Services, and Student Access. Thank you all so much for your continued support of this podcast. You too can sponsor the Let's Talk Trio podcast in one of three ways. Become a monthly patron on Patreon. Our base level starts at $1 a month. Become a corporate sponsor by placing an ad on the podcast. Email us for details. Become a supporter with a one-time donation to the podcast PayPal account. Our handle is @Let'sTalkTrio. I'd like to take a moment to thank our honorary members of the Let's Talk Trio podcast, Roderick Chambers, Tony Ho, Scott Kendall, and Susan Cramp. The Let's Talk Trio podcast team is John Russell, audio engineer, music producer and composer, and post-production editor. Amelia Castañeda, script supervisor, marketing manager, social media manager, and producer. Juan Rivas, executive producer and host. This episode was recorded Monday, December 18th, 2023. We are in an election year. I strongly urge our listeners to exercise their right to vote. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode.